Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scouting for Chelsea on Chelsea Perspective. But before we continue, please smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and more importantly, click on the bell notification button so you don't miss anything. So, let's get into it. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Nischal from Nischal's blog. Nischal, welcome back to Chelsea Perspective.
Thank you. And thank you very much for having me back. I'm looking forward to recording again and getting straight into it.
It is always fun to talk football with you, so why not? And I appreciate you finding time to be here with me today because I understand how busy you are. So, Nischal, what player did you scout, and what position does the player play in?
The player I've chosen is Denis Zakaria from Borussia Mönchengladbach and Switzerland. Now, we had this discussion before about seeing players at Euro 2020 perform really well. But for me, there wasn't anyone who really stood out where I thought, yes, we need to buy him solely on this tournament. And Zakaria is someone I know very well. You know, I'm a Swiss journalist, so I've seen him for years progressing up through the ranks, through the national team, through club level. And I've seen him develop and grow as a player. And I've always wanted him. And especially now is where I really would love to see Chelsea sign him because we need a defensive midfielder. It's as simple as that. And Zakaria is a perfect profile for that. As a defensive midfielder, he's young, he's got potential. And as we'll go into more detail, he's a perfect player to boost our midfield options at Chelsea.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I've followed Denis Zakaria for a while now, and I like the way he plays. But I'm a little bit concerned. Looks like he's not been, you can say that Denis Zakaria of 2018-2019, where he had around, I think, 4 goals and I think 2 assists. But for 2021, he seemed to have struggled a little bit. What happened?
Well, Denis Zakaria struggled a lot with injury in this recent season. He had injury problems at the end of last season, which kept him out through the restart period after the pandemic, which kept him out through the end of that season and into this season. So he's been struggling with injury a lot in the last year. And that's reflected in his stats, you know, with goal scoring and also games played, especially. He struggled to really be playing as many games as he wants to for club and for country. We saw at the Euros, for example, Switzerland started with Granit Xhaka and Remo Freuler, and Zakaria was on the bench. Nothing to do with ability because he is one of our best midfielders. But the fact is, he hasn't been playing regular football. He hasn't been fully fit. So that's definitely something that could dissuade some Chelsea fans or any fans from signing him. But for me, it shouldn't be a case. Yes, he struggled with injury, but he's getting back to his full fitness. He's getting back to the ability and the level he was before. And he will be far, far better than this. So it's been a big hurdle for him to overcome. And the fact that he's back in the same position and even better at this point shows that he's got that resilience and he's also strong enough and fit enough to be a professional at this level.
Yeah, I understand your point clearly, but that's a concern here. It will be difficult for someone not to overlook the fact that he struggled with injuries, no matter how good he's been or no matter how good we know he can be. So are you confident should Chelsea decide to go for him that they will be able to manage his health and help him stay fit and do not struggle with injury as is done in Germany? Because that's a big hurdle to overcome. That's even something very difficult. I believe the board will not look beyond. That's something they will look into very seriously before considering, okay, should we go for him right now? Because that's a problem there.
Absolutely, so, it is a big concern.
Yes. So
absolutely,
how do you think
that he's been injured?
Yeah. So my question is, do you think that Chelsea Football Club, because it looks like we'll have a very good medical team, because there are cases where people are said to be injured. Some players are said have been rumored to be injury prone, but once they come to Chelsea, the whole thing seems, we don't talk about it anymore. Or in most cases, some people, when they leave Chelsea to other clubs, they seem to struggle with injuries. So are you confident that the Chelsea medical team can take care of that and keep him fit?
Yes, I am confident. And the important thing to remember is, yes, Zakaria is coming off a big injury, a really crucial one, which kept him out for a long time. But that doesn't mean he's an injury-prone player. He's far from it. This was a big injury that kept him out, but it was nothing to do with a lack of fitness, the sharpness. It was unlucky, and it was something that really did derail his career temporarily. But I wouldn't have any concerns about, look, of course, Chelsea will be looking at fitness and injury history for any player that they sign. You look at some players in the current squad, like Azpilicueta, who's never injured. There's no doubt that when Chelsea went to sign him 9 years ago, they were looking at his injury record, how he was with fitness, how fit of an athlete he was. And the same will be done with Zakaria. But if anything does happen, like you said, we've got one of the best medical teams in the country, great resources, great facilities to deal with injuries, to deal with the medical team. And it's something we're not alien to. We've had players who've struggled with injuries. And of course, there's going to be a concern if we bring a player who's struggled with injury, but he's not injury prone. He's coming back from it. And I'm sure that his fitness will improve with Chelsea looking after him, helping him develop. And he is still young. If he was later on in his career, perhaps 32, 33, and getting this sort of injury, of course he'd be dissuaded from it. Why would you want to sign an older player going into the twilight of his career, struggling with injury? But he's not. He's a young player. He is so young and early in his career, and he's still the quality player that he was before. So I would have no concerns about it. And I would ask any fans who are looking at Zakaria, or any clubs who are looking at Zakaria, yes, the injury is a concern, but don't be dissuaded by it, because underneath the recent injuries had, literally just in the last year, there's a quality player who will improve pretty much any team.
Yeah, a fair argument there, and hopefully it's not, the injury is not something that's going to be persistent. And like you've argued that he's not injury prone, he's just had one bad injury. But usually, as we fans, we don't look beyond that. We think just for the moment. We don't think beyond the moment, and that's a big problem. So now, the question I have for you is this: he's a defensive midfielder. But there's something I'd like you to understand. We know how well Ngolo Kante takes care of himself. And given that reason, given that he takes good care of himself, he will be there for a long time. And given his qualities, I can see managers trying to find a way to keep him playing. In the future, when he gets into his mid-30s, they'll probably try to play him in a manner where he doesn't have to run too much, and which suits the defensive midfield role very well. We know he's got a great engine in him right now at this age. He bumps forward, backwards, he's practically everywhere on the pitch. So how would should Chelsea sign him now? Do you think he's going to be happy playing second fiddle to Ngolo Kante, given that he's a Swiss international and he's good? He's really good. He can do literally everything that Ngolo Kante does. You can say he's taller than him. So in terms of aerial battles, he'll probably do better than him. Isn't he taller than Ngolo Kante?
He is. He's well taller than Ngolo Kante.
Exactly. So I've seen him. I know he's good on the air. I've seen him score with his head also. And he's good with his passes. He can read the game very well. The question is, do you think Zakaria will be content at playing second fiddle to Ngolo Kante because it's probably going to be more than 3 years before you start saying, okay, we can be rotating the defensive midfielders?
I'm not sure about the time frame. I feel like playing second fiddle to Ngolo Kante, Zakaria will take that. He'll want to be playing, he'll want to be getting game time, but he will understand that he'll be behind Kante in the pecking order. But what we're saying about his injury is very interesting because, yes, Kante does look after himself very well. He's still playing at the peak of his games at arguably his best season for Chelsea. But in the last 2 seasons, we've seen Kante have more injuries than he's ever had before. You look at these last 2 seasons and his games played in the Premier League has decreased, missing games through injury and through all of this throughout the season. So yes, he's still fit. Yes, he's still a quality player. But we're seeing him struggle with injuries much, much more, which is indicating for me, not that he's a bad player, because he's far from it. He's our best player, undoubtedly. What it does show to me is that Ngolo Kante is getting into that period of his career where he'll struggle more with injury. And when he does get injured, it will hurt him more. It will be longer. It will last longer. It will hit him harder. So Look, long term, yes, Ngolo Kante will be our option, but there will be a time where we will need to replace him, and we need to start thinking of that. When we look at our current midfield, where can we strengthen it? And it's in defensive midfield because yes, we've got great options with Ngolo Kante, Jorginho, Mateo Kovacic. Now Billy Gilmour's gone out on loan, but the ideal situation is if we came in 2-3 years and we had Ngolo Kante, Mateo Kovacic as your key midfield, and then Denis Zakaria and Billy Gilmour as your young midfield. They would be coming up together, so hopefully forming a partnership in the future, because that's a very, very young midfield who could hopefully take over the reins. And we could see Billy Gilmour taking over from Kovacic or Jorginho in that role, and Zakaria taking over from Conte in the other role. So I think that's something we could really look forward to. And the whole point of a Zakaria signing isn't to instantly make our midfield the best in the world. It's a long-term project. It's a long-term signing. And that's what we need at Chelsea.
Yeah, a fair argument there. Okay, now we've established that the injury isn't a worry for us, and again, we have to be truthful here. We have so many games this coming season. That there are so many games to play: the FA Cup, the Premier League, the Champions League, the Carabao Cup, the World Club Cup, and also the Super Cup. There are quite a lot of games to play, so there's not that possibility for a single player to play the whole game. Now, the question I have for you, I've looked at his statistics for the past season. He had, I know, although considering he was injured, he didn't play much games. But still, if you look at 2018, 2019, where he had like 4 goals and 3 assists or so, but for 2020, 2021, he had just 1 goal and 1 assist. Now, before I come back to his statistics, if you look at Chelsea's past season record, the midfielders didn't contribute much to goals, except for Jorginho, who's the highest goal scorer. But the whole goals that he scored all came from come from penalty spots. So it doesn't look like Denis Zakaria will help us solve the goal scoring problem or help us solve the low number of assists from our midfield, because you can say even combined, our midfielders combined last season didn't do much in terms of assists. So if he cannot help us solve that problem, the goal scoring problems from the midfield, or the low number of assists from the midfielders, what else does he offer? What else will he offer to the team should we sign him now that's going to compel the board to say, okay, you know what? I think we need this guy.
Adding goals to midfield is probably one of the biggest disadvantages of Zakaria's game. He has the potential to be scoring, to be getting assists, but as we've seen in his numbers for Switzerland, for Mönchengladbach, they've not been high enough. He's not reached double figures. He's not been getting enough goals, enough assists, as you might expect in a certain team like Chelsea. And it is one of our biggest weaknesses. We have a great midfield, but one that can be strengthened and one where we need more goals from, especially when you consider we've got European champions, a World Cup winner, and those players of that sort of profile in that team. So goal scoring is a big concern. The way I do see it, though, is that I feel that Zakaria has the potential for that. And again, you can easily use that argument against saying we don't need a potential player. We need someone who's going to come in the here and now to instantly improve our midfield and challenge for the title straight away. And I completely understand that. I completely agree with that. But I believe that bringing in Zakaria, bringing him and getting that training in at Chelsea at that top level, and we can develop him into a more goal-scoring midfielder if that's what we need. On the other hand, with Ngolo Kante, one of the criticisms of him, and the few criticisms, is that he doesn't score enough goals and he gets into these positions, but he doesn't score. But I don't expect my defensive midfielder to be scoring goals. Yes, you want to see goals coming from midfield. Frank Lampard's a prime example, our all-time leading goal scorer. But with Zakaria, with Kante, they are defensive midfield. The same with Jorginho. Their job is to defend, hold the midfield, and start the attacks, not to be bombing into the box, scoring from outside the box. It's a bonus, don't get me wrong, but we shouldn't be expecting our midfielders and our defensive midfielders especially to be scoring our goals. If anything, that's the striker's job. And that gets us into a whole nother story about why we need to get a striker. But I don't have any concerns about Zakaria not being a goal scorer. I would like to see him add that to his game. And that is the biggest disadvantage of his game. But in terms of what he offers that physicality and that strength from midfield. He's a very hard-working box-to-box midfielder and how he's used. And he's also, for me, a perfect heir to Ngolo Kante, because in a few years, we are going to see Ngolo Kante move on, whether we like it or not. whether that's through injury, whether he wants to move on, whether he wants to go back to France. But we're going to need to get a player to bring in and carry on N'Golo Kante's heir. And that's where Zakaria is the perfect profile for me in his passing, in his aerial presence. He's a very technically gifted player as well, and someone which I see a lot of potential and a lot of ability in to thrive at Chelsea and have a top level of football.
Yeah, you make a very good argument there, and what the most important thing I picked from that last response from you is that we need N'Golo Kante's heir right now. We don't have to wait until he's approaching the end of his career or he decides to leave Chelsea. Then we start looking. Then we have a problem. It is important to bring somebody like Denis Zakaria in to understudy him. There's quite a lot to learn from him, and that makes perfect sense. So now let's look at all the other midfielders that are rumored that are rumors that the club are looking at them. Somebody like Declan Rice, Tchouaméni, and who is again? I think those two are the most prominent in the media, as in terms of who's been rumored that the club are looking at. How does Zakaria compare to Declan Rice and Tchouaméni?
Honestly, I can't speak too much on Tchouaméni because I don't know enough about him, but I'm very keen to learn more about him. And I know there's a video on your channel talking about him, so I'm going to be watching that and getting more information and learn about him. Declan Rice is the main comparison because most Chelsea fans want to sign Rice. He's the key man that a lot of Chelsea fans are looking at to strengthen that midfield and bring in as an option. And I agree, he's a fantastic player. We've seen him playing for England. He's been excellent. He's got an advantage of having more game time. He's a better goal scorer than Zakaria. He's got the experience of the Premier League and English physicality and all of that. I would argue that Zakaria is better aerially. He's more technically gifted. But then Declan Rice is better box to box. He's better defensively. And he's also more versatile. He can play as centre back as well as defensive midfield. But for me, the key difference between Denis Zakaria and Declan Rice is the price tag. Money is never going to be an issue for Chelsea. We know that. But will Chelsea and Marina Granovskaya, will she want to be spending around 80, 90, maybe even 100 million on Declan Rice? It could be lower, but even then, whatever we pay for Declan Rice, it is going to be a lot of money. That's not to say Chelsea can't afford him. That's not to say Chelsea won't want to pay that or West Ham won't value him as high. But I see a better, cheaper alternative in Denis Zakaria. His current market value as per transfer market is £27 million, which is a very, very good deal. And for me, if we got him at that value, it would be a bargain. I would say, however, we would probably have to pay more than that for him. But if you look at Zakaria, market value of £27 million, it's been lowered from being injured and from having a difficult season, shall we say, with Borussia Mönchengladbach. And especially, his contract runs out next summer, which is a big, big advantage, which means Chelsea could even get him for much, much cheaper. Whereas for Declan Rice, he's got a long-term contract at West Ham. He's a key player. He's going to be the next captain after Mark Noble retires, which will be at the end of this season. So if we're looking at financially, bear in mind we want to get Erling Haaland, and that's going to cost us a lot of money. If we can get Erling Haaland, spend all our money and resources on him, and we get a much cheaper alternative to Declan Rice and Denis Zakaria, it makes a lot more sense financially, and especially as I believe Mönchengladbach will be more open to selling Denis Zakaria than West Ham will be selling Declan Rice.
Yeah, that's a very, very good argument right there. Looking at things from a financial perspective, and also, Denis Zakaria have some attributes that clearly Declan Rice cannot offer. So it makes perfect sense. It will make perfect sense for the club to go for Denis Zakaria instead of Declan Rice, because given that the club is pursuing Erling Haaland, and that would be a blockbuster signing, that we already know that. So I don't think the club will be actually spend that much money in the same window, around 100 plus for Erling Haaland, and then 80 plus, or even if it's less, it's still a lot of money to spend in a single window for two players, or in an area where they can get a cheaper alternative who can get the job done, even if not even better. So now, clearly, Nischal, can you help us understand specifically what problem Denis Zakaria will serve for the team? I know we've somehow talked about it as we would as the episode progressed, but can you specifically tell the fans what problem Denis Zakaria will solve for the team should we sign him today?
There's no doubt that Chelsea have a very strong midfield in Jorginho, Mateo Kovacic, and Ngolo Kante. And it's not to say that Denis Zakaria is far better than them. He's not. That's being honest. But what I see in our midfield is inconsistency, a lack of options sometimes, especially now we've let go of Billy Gilmour on loan. Yes, he'll be back in the Chelsea squad. I've no doubt about that. That opens up another slot for the Chelsea midfield. We'll need to be rotating. We'll need to have midfield options. And for me, Zakaria adds that consistency that we need. He adds that quality and he adds that youthful talent that we need in midfield. Because with these three midfielders we've got, they're all in their prime right now. But we need someone young to carry on the reins and help start that transition into the new generation of youth midfielders. So Zakaria adds that extra quality, adds that consistency. He adds, the aerial presence, which sometimes we can lack. He adds that consistency and those lack of mistakes that occasionally we see in Kovacic's game, in Jorginho's game. And overall, he's a brilliant option to really strengthen up our midfield because we really need to improve our midfield. If we want to challenge for a title, we need a striker and we need a defensive midfielder. And for me, Zakaria is a perfect player to fill that hole in midfield, whether it's partnering up with Ngolo Kante, playing as a substitute, impact sub, or playing in those games where we need to rest those players. He will give us that perfect option at an affordable price, at a good time in his career, at a good age, and at a good value. So he ticks all the boxes for Chelsea. And for me, Denis Zakaria is the perfect midfielder for Chelsea to sign this summer or next.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because I think we've learned over time that Jorginho and Kovacic, they play better when you pay either of them with a player who's defensively sound. And the only player who's defensively sound in that midfield right now is Ngolo Kante. So it makes sense to have a second player who's also defensively sound. So when Kante isn't playing, to have since we've learned that it's Tuchel prefers having. That is, he often likes to field Kovacic or Jorginho. So, but either of the two, when you don't pair them with N'Golo Kante, there's always some weakness in our midfield in terms of defensively. There's always a weakness in our midfield when N'Golo Kante isn't on the pitch. But if we have somebody like Denis Zakaria, when N'Golo Kante isn't there, you can pair Zakaria with either Kovacic or Jorginho, and that won't have so much concern in terms of the defensive aspect of the game. So it will be a very good signing for us. And for how much again you said?
He's valued at 27 million, but I'd estimate around 40 to 50 million.
Exactly, and around for that fee, I don't think it's bad. It's a good buy, but usually it looks like that should I say stereotype that when a player is not costly, people don't see that player as a good player these days. But I think hopefully the club are looking at him. So Nischal, it's always a pleasure to talk football with you, and I appreciate you finding time to be here. Hopefully you won't be. Hopefully I'll be able to get you again because you're a very, very busy person. So please take some time, tell the viewers about Nischal's blog and what they can find when they visit your blog.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back on, Coachila. It's a pleasure to come on the channel and to see you growing and building the channel up. So congratulations on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you have in plan for next season. If you've enjoyed what you've heard from me today, you can find all of my work on nishalsblog.com. Articles, videos, podcasts, they're all there. And you can see my full coverage of Chelsea and Switzerland, where I talk about players like Zakaria. I cover Chelsea during the season and Switzerland during Euro 2020 and the international breaks. And if you want to see me, you can follow me on Twitter at Nischal_SP, where again, you'll find all of my work. You can keep up to date with what I'm doing and see everything, all things Chelsea, all things Switzerland, and all things football.
Thank you very much for taking the time to introduce yourself again, Nischal. I appreciate that. All right, people, you see his Twitter handle on the screen. Go check it out. And also, I'll provide a complete information to his blog, so you go check it out. And I can promise you, you will not be disappointed because I've checked them out myself. Lots of great read there from the perspective of Switzerland, overall, football overall, and also more importantly, Chelsea Football Club. Nischal, again, it's a pleasure having you on the show, and I appreciate you finding time to be here. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.